The Empire Strikes Back stands as the crown jewel of the Star Wars saga, a film that deepened the mythology and darkened the tone of George Lucas's space fantasy. But beneath its polished surface lies a labyrinth of production challenges, creative conflicts, and personal struggles that most fans have never fully understood. The cast and crew who brought this masterpiece to life carried secrets that would transform how we see their iconic performances. What if you discovered that some of the most memorable moments in the film were never in the script? Or that behind those groundbreaking special effects lurked technical disasters that nearly sank the entire production? What if the actors themselves were often as much in the dark about the story as the audience would be? Let's pull back the curtain on this beloved classic to reveal the human drama behind the space opera, the conflicts, improvisations, and happy accidents that shaped cinematic history. The truth is that The Empire Strikes Back represents something rare in blockbuster filmmaking, a sequel that expanded and deepened its universe while taking extraordinary creative risks. But the story of how it came to be contains multiple layers that most viewers never perceive. First, there's the leadership paradox. George Lucas stepped back from directing duties, financing the film independently to maintain creative control while handing the directorial reins to Irvin Kershner, a choice that puzzled many at the time. This tension between control and delegation would define the production. Second, there's the performance revelation. The cast was often working with incomplete information, their genuine reactions captured on film as they learned story developments in real time. Third, there's the technical innovation born from disaster. When conventional effects techniques failed, the team was forced to invent new approaches that would revolutionize filmmaking. And finally, there's the human cost: physical injuries, emotional exhaustion, and professional conflicts that tested everyone involved in ways that never made it into the official narrative. As Mark Hamill revealed decades later, what you see on screen is the polished gem. What we lived through was the pressure and heat that created it. The Empire Strikes Back premiered in May 1980, arriving 3 years after the original Star Wars had transformed popular culture. But its origins tell a different story than the confident sequel machine we associate with modern franchises. George Lucas had mortgaged his future on the original film, and despite its success, approached the follow-up with trepidation. The pressure to match the cultural phenomenon he'd created weighed heavily. Lucas made the unconventional decision to self-finance the sequel entirely, a $33 million gamble that gave him creative freedom but placed his entire fortune at risk. In 1979, $33 million represented one of the largest independent film investments in Hollywood history, nearly 3 times the budget of the original Star Wars. The studio system watched with bewilderment as Lucas selected Irvin Kershner, known for smaller, character-driven films like Eyes of Laura Mars, to direct what was expected to be an effects-driven spectacle. Producer Gary Kurtz described the choice as prioritizing the human element that would give the fantasy lasting power. But as production began in Norway, neither the cast nor crew could anticipate how their personal struggles would mirror the darkness that was about to engulf their fictional galaxy. Harrison Ford, now synonymous with Han Solo's roguish charm, arrived on set deeply ambivalent about his return. What most fans never realized was that Ford lobbied Lucas to kill off his character, believing Solo's arc should conclude with a heroic sacrifice. "I thought the best utility of the character would be for him to die and give the story some weight," Ford revealed years later. But George had other ideas. This philosophical divide created an unexpected alchemy in Ford's performance. The actor's professional detachment merged with Solo's characteristic cynicism, creating a richer character than either Ford or Lucas initially envisioned. The tension you feel in Solo's scenes isn't just acting, it's the real creative friction between performer and role. Meanwhile, Mark Hamill was grappling with the aftermath of a devastating car accident that had occurred between the films, requiring facial reconstruction surgery. Rather than hiding this reality, Kirshner incorporated it into the narrative. The Wampa attack in the film's opening was expanded to explain Luke's changed appearance. Hamill channeled his physical pain and uncertainty into Luke's psychological journey, later reflecting, "Sometimes the line between what you're feeling and what your character is supposed to be feeling gets very thin." But perhaps the most profound persona split belonged to Carrie Fisher. While Princess Leia projected regal confidence and command, Fisher was battling the beginning stages of substance issues and bipolar disorder, often arriving on set exhausted after nights of insomnia. The price of these performances was a blurring between actor and character that created authenticity at considerable personal cost. When fans discuss the narrative masterstroke of The Empire Strikes Back, they inevitably point to the Darth Vader revelation. Yet what most don't realize is that this defining moment, perhaps the most famous plot twist in cinema history, was not part of the original concept. The first draft of the screenplay by Lee Brackett made no mention of Vader being Luke's father. After Brackett's death in 1978, Lucas reworked the script with Lawrence Kasdan, introducing the paternity twist that would redefine the saga. But here's what changed everything. The decision was kept secret from almost the entire cast and crew. The shooting script contained a fake line, with Vader claiming Obi-Wan had killed Luke's father. Only Mark Hamill was told the truth shortly before filming the scene. On the actual filmed take, David Prowse, inside the Vader suit, spoke the decoy line, "Obi-Wan killed your father," while James Earl Jones would later record the true revelation during post-production. This secrecy had profound implications. The reactions of the film crew were genuine shock. The other actors performed the remainder of the film without knowing this crucial plot point. Their performances untainted by knowledge their characters wouldn't possess. Producer Gary Kurtz later reflected, "That single decision to compartmentalize the information created a ripple effect through the entire production. People were making creative choices in a kind of vacuum, which somehow made the whole thing feel more authentic." This approach to storytelling, where even the storytellers themselves weren't privy to the full narrative, created a unique alchemy that would prove impossible to replicate in later films, when plot security became a more sophisticated concern. The romantic vision of filmmaking dissolved quickly in the harsh Norwegian winter where production began. The crew faced the worst snowstorm in the region in 50 years, with temperatures dropping to 20 degrees. Equipment froze. Sets were buried overnight. Simple shots became endurance tests. We would trudge out into the blizzard to place the cameras, and they would be buried by the time we got back, recalled camera operator Peter Biziou. Most days we got only a handful of usable shots. The physical toll was immense. During the filming of the Hoth scenes, Mark Hamill was still recovering from his facial injuries and hung upside down in the Wampa cave while battling pneumonia. The costume department had to constantly modify the snowsuits as the actors lost weight from illness and exhaustion. When production moved to Elstree Studios in London, new challenges emerged. The practical effects for Yoda, perhaps the most ambitious puppet ever created for film at that time, repeatedly failed during early tests. Frank Oz and his team worked 16-hour days redesigning the puppet's mechanics, while the production schedule slipped further behind. A catastrophic soundstage fire at Elstree destroyed expensive sets and equipment, adding to the financial pressure. The stress began affecting relationships on set. Carrie Fisher later described the atmosphere as a pressure cooker of creative anxiety. The most grueling sequences proved to be the Dagobah scenes. Filmed on a closed, humid set, filled with artificial mist and dirt, the conditions were described by crew members as working in a terrarium from hell. Mark Hamill spent weeks performing physically demanding stunts while carrying the Yoda puppet on his back, developing chronic pain issues that would persist for years. The set became so uncomfortable that director Kirshner collapsed from exhaustion and had to be briefly hospitalized, returning to set against medical advice because he feared the production might be taken away from him. Yet, from this crucible of physical hardship came the film's signature visual texture, a lived-in, weathered galaxy that felt tangibly real in ways green screens never could. Look closely at the carbon-freezing chamber scene, and you'll notice something peculiar about Han Solo's shirt. Between shots, the collar mysteriously changes position, open in some frames, closed in others. This continuity error exists because Harrison Ford was suffering from food poisoning that day, forcing frequent breaks and costume adjustments between takes. Kirshner chose to keep shooting rather than lose a day of production, deciding that the emotional authenticity of the scene outweighed perfect continuity. The result? Carrie Fisher's tears during the "I love you, I know" exchange were partly genuine concern for her visibly ill co-star. Harrison was green, Fisher recalled years later. Not just ill, but actually green. I wasn't acting entirely when I looked heartbroken. In the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader, attentive viewers might notice that Luke performs a somersault that seems to defy physics. Mark Hamill was actually catapulted by a hidden wire team, but in one take, they pulled too hard, causing him to flip completely and land awkwardly, resulting in a hairline fracture to his ankle. Hamill finished the scene despite the injury, and Kirshner incorporated the slightly chaotic movement into the final cut, believing it reinforced Luke's desperate, untrained fighting style. Perhaps most significantly, during the scene where Han Solo is tortured, the screams heard aren't actually Harrison Ford's voice. Sound designer Ben Burt created the audio by mixing animal cries with mechanical sounds, finding Ford's genuine screams too disturbing for what was ostensibly a family film. This subtle audio substitution changes the scene's psychological impact in ways viewers process subconsciously, creating discomfort without the explicit horror that would accompany authentic human screaming. These micro-details represent the invisible architecture that supports the film's emotional resonance, decisions made under pressure that accidentally enhanced the storytelling in ways that careful planning never could. While audiences saw a seamless cinematic vision unfold on screen, behind the scenes raged a fundamental conflict about what Star Wars should be. This tension centered on the unlikely creative triangle of George Lucas, director Irvin Kershner, and screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan. Lucas, despite stepping back from directing, maintained his vision of a mythic space opera with broad appeal. Kershner, however, pushed for psychological depth and European cinema influences. Kasdan, meanwhile, advocated for harder edges and adult themes. These competing perspectives created daily creative battles that shaped every scene. George would visit set and see what we were doing, and you could tell. He was concerned, Kershner confided years later. We were making something darker, more ambiguous than he initially wanted. But to his credit, he let us continue. The most heated battles involved the film's ending. Lucas wanted resolution and a clearer victory to send audiences home satisfied. Kershner and Kasdan fought for the unresolved, downbeat conclusion that would eventually make it to screen. Production meetings became increasingly tense, with producer Gary Kurtz often mediating between Lucas and his creative team. The film ultimately ran $10 million over budget and several months behind schedule, creating financial stress that strained these creative relationships further. The marketing department at 20th Century Fox added another layer of conflict, pushing back against the film's darker tone. Internal memos reveal executives worried that the downbeat ending might damage the merchandising potential that had become central to the franchise's business model. What emerged from these conflicts was a film that satisfied neither side completely, yet somehow transcended the sum of its parts. The creative tension produced something none of them would have created individually, a blockbuster with an art film's soul. Perhaps the greatest irony of The Empire Strikes Back lies in its initial reception. The film that would later be hailed as the finest in the saga opened to decidedly mixed reviews. Critics who had embraced the straightforward heroism of the original found themselves confused by the sequel's moral complexity and unresolved ending. The New York Times called it an epic without a finale, while Time magazine labeled it a lifeless copy of the original. Audiences, too, seemed initially bewildered by a Star Wars film that denied them the triumphant conclusion they'd expected. This lukewarm reception deeply affected Lucas, who had risked his personal fortune on the film. For a while, I thought I had somehow destroyed what we'd built, he admitted years later. The reaction wasn't what we expected at all. Yet within this apparent failure lay the seeds of the film's eventual elevation. The very elements that confused audiences in 1980, the moral ambiguity, the unhappy ending, the psychological complexity, would later be recognized as the qualities that gave the film its lasting power. Meanwhile, the actors found themselves caught in another irony. As their characters became more complex and compelling, they themselves became less seen as serious performers and more as merchandise-friendly icons. Harrison Ford struggled the most with this paradox, watching his nuanced performance become reduced to action figures and trading cards. "There's a strange disconnect," Ford noted years later, "between the work we were doing, which I think had real substance, and how it was packaged and sold." The cast's struggle for artistic recognition paralleled their characters' fight against the Empire, a battle against forces that threatened to reduce complex individuals to simplistic roles in a larger machine. Beneath the mixed critical reception, something unprecedented was happening with audiences. While they may have initially been surprised by the film's darker turn, they kept returning to theaters. The Empire Strikes Back developed a unique pattern at the box office. Instead of the typical sharp decline after opening weekend, attendance stabilized and then gradually increased as word of mouth spread. What the studio initially perceived as disappointment was actually the birth of a new kind of blockbuster, one that rewarded multiple viewings and deeper engagement. By the end of its theatrical run, Empire had earned $538 million worldwide, against its $33 million budget, proving that artistic risk could align with commercial success. But the true breakthrough came in how the film changed Hollywood's approach to sequels forever. Before Empire, sequels were typically diminished retreads of original films, produced cheaply to capitalize on name recognition. After Empire, studios began to see sequels as opportunities to expand storytelling rather than simply repeat it. "We didn't know it at the time," Kirshner reflected, "but we were creating a template for how franchises could evolve and mature with their audiences." The technical innovations born from the production's challenges would transform filmmaking. The refinement of stop-motion animation for the AT-AT walkers, the breakthrough puppetry techniques developed for Yoda, and the composite photography methods pioneered for the lightsaber duels all became industry standards. Industrial Light and Magic, Lucas's effects company, leveraged these innovations to establish itself as the preeminent special effects house in the industry, a position it maintains to this day. The production's struggles had forged techniques that would influence everything from Jurassic Park to The Lord of the Rings. But perhaps the most significant breakthrough was psychological. Empire demonstrated that audiences could handle and even embrace complexity, moral ambiguity, and unhappy endings in their blockbuster entertainment. The influence of The Empire Strikes Back extends far beyond the Star Wars saga itself. Its DNA can be found throughout modern cinema, often in places viewers might not immediately recognize. Christopher Nolan has repeatedly cited the film's narrative structure as influential on his Batman trilogy, particularly in how The Dark Knight serves as a middle chapter that darkens and complicates its hero's journey. The second film, our darkest chapter pattern became so prevalent that it transformed into a recognizable trope across franchises from Harry Potter to the MCU. The film's visual language revolutionized how cinematic space was depicted. The contrast between the sterile Imperial environments and the organic Rebel settings became a shorthand for depicting moral alignment through production design, a technique visible in everything from Blade Runner to The Hunger Games. For the actors, the film's legacy created complex ripple effects in their careers. Mark Hamill found himself so thoroughly identified with Luke Skywalker that he pivoted to voice acting, eventually finding new fame as the Joker in Batman animated productions. Harrison Ford leveraged his Han Solo persona into the similar but distinct Indiana Jones franchise, threading a careful path between typecasting and star power. Carrie Fisher's experience perhaps reflects the most profound professional aftershock. The tension between her screen image and personal struggles eventually led her to a successful writing career, producing novels and memoirs that explored the very dichotomy between public persona and private reality that Empire had dramatized. The technical teams scattered throughout the industry, carrying Empire's innovations with them. Effects artists who cut their teeth on the film went on to lead departments at every major studio, while the producing team's approach to managing complex productions became a template for modern blockbusters. Even the film's marketing failures proved instructive. After watching the relatively muted promotional campaign struggle to prepare audiences for the film's tone, studios developed increasingly sophisticated strategies for managing audience expectations for complex franchise entries. But perhaps the most significant ripple effect was how Empire changed audience relationships with fictional universes. By deepening the mythology and complicating its characters, it trained viewers to engage with popular entertainment on multiple levels simultaneously, as both spectacle and text, as both escapism and commentary. When we look back at The Empire Strikes Back with fresh eyes, what emerges isn't just a great sequel or an effective piece of entertainment, but a film that fundamentally changed our relationship with popular cinema. It's a pivot point between the simpler blockbusters that preceded it and the more complex franchise storytelling that followed. The film endures because it respects its audience's intelligence while never losing sight of its emotional core. The plot twist that reveals Vader as Luke's father works not merely as shock value, but as the culmination of a carefully constructed psychological journey, both for the characters and the viewers. The production challenges that plagued the film, the budget overruns, the Norwegian blizzards, the on-set injuries, the creative conflicts, didn't diminish the final product but enhanced it. The human struggle behind the camera somehow translated into authentic emotion on screen. Looking back, Mark Hamill reflected on the film's 40th anniversary. It's almost as if the Force was with us, even when we thought it wasn't. The difficulties created something more powerful than a smooth production ever could have. What most fans never fully grasp is that The Empire Strikes Back succeeded, not despite breaking the rules of blockbuster filmmaking, but because of it. By prioritizing character over spectacle, ambiguity over certainty, and artistic risk over commercial safety, it created a template for how popular entertainment could also be profound. The film reminds us that the most enduring stories are those that balance darkness and light, that dare to leave questions unanswered, and that trust audiences to embrace complexity rather than require simplification. It transformed a space fantasy into a generational mythology by insisting that even escapist entertainment could grapple with the deepest human questions of identity, moral choice, and destiny. When you watch it again, and you should, look past the lightsabers and space battles to see what's hiding in plain sight. A deeply human drama about facing the darkness within ourselves and finding the courage to continue even when victory seems impossible. That's the secret that keeps us returning to that galaxy far, far away, again and again. If you've discovered something new about this beloved classic, hit the like button and share which revelation changed how you see the film. After all, just like Luke on Dagobah, sometimes we need to look beneath the surface to discover the truth that was there all along.